Alright guys, so we're going to try our little flipped classroom experiment. So this is going to be the lesson. This of course is your homework. It's to watch the lesson, and then your actual homework as in practice will happen in class tomorrow. So we're just going to do a little bit of review because we've talked about a couple of these non-chord tones, but we're going to be talking about 7 chord tones altogether. Okay? So by definition, a non-harmonic tone, or an NCT, are notes that do not belong in a certain chord or harmony. Okay, so if we look on, in this example, the F is a non-harmonic tone because it does not fit into the one chord, which should contain C, E, and G. So here we have a C major chord, and then the soprano voice, which is for some reason the demonstration voice throughout this lesson, then walks out of the harmony and then walks back into it. Now this is the non-harmonic tone of the measure. This C major chord's C major goodness is valid for the entire 4 beats of this bar. Okay, so everything has to fit within the C, E, G-ness of this chord, but then the soprano voice does not, and that is why this is a non-chord tone, because it does not fit in the underlying harmony of the rest of the voices. Okay? Before we go on, we're going to talk about different kind of non-harmonic tones, but we're going to first define 2 terms and also identify a couple symbols that are used in this lesson. Okay? So a step is equal to an interval of a generic second. Generic second meaning major second or minor second or augmented second. It doesn't matter. The point is that the voice goes from a line to the adjacent space or vice versa, from the space to the adjacent line. In either direction, doesn't matter. And in this lesson you can tell that it's a step because there's a red line. A skip is equal to an interval of a generic third or more. 3rd, 9th, 12th, 14th, anything besides a second is a skip. And in this lesson you can tell a skip, and it is notated by these 2 double blue lines. Okay, so here's the review part because we've already talked about this. But a passing tone is approached by step and then continues by step in the same direction. So here we have a C major chord, and the C major chord is harmony. The harmony for the C major chord is valid throughout this entire bar. But then the soprano voice steps out of the chord tone that it belongs to, which is a G, down by step, you can tell by the red line, out of the harmony, and then continues in the same direction down to land in a different harmony. Well, actually in this case it's the same harmony, but a passing tone can be in either or. A passing tone can happen between 2 different chords, and this is just in this case for an example that they're both C major chords. But the point is that the voice that has the non-chord tone is walking out of the harmony in one direction and then continuing in the same direction to land in another harmonic place. Okay? So that's a passing tone. If a passing tone occurs with the second chord instead of the middle of the 2 chords, it is called an accent passing tone. Now if you need a second throughout this video, just go ahead and pause and take some notes, or you can rewind and listen to anything again. That's kind of the beauty of this experiment, is that it's not a classroom where you have to just sort of take things down as fast as possible. You can take your time and get through the lesson and write the notes that you need. But anyway, so here's your C major chord, and then the next chord, which actually it's also C major, but let's ignore the fact that it's the same harmony, happens on a beat. All the voices change, so to speak, except for one voice, which is that naughty soprano again, which went down from the G, down by step to an F, and then finally resolved to an E. The important part is that the non-chord tone happened on the beat when the rest of the voices changed harmony. But the reason that it's still identified as a passing tone is because the direction was the same and it was all in step. So that is an accented passing tone. A neighboring tone, labeled NT, is approached by step and then returns by step to the original note. The C major chord, C, C, E, G, which is valid for the entire bar. Then the soprano steps out of the C, E, G chord structure and then goes back into the same exact chord structure, opposite the way that it was approached. So here's the approach, and then here is the resolution. Okay? It's both by step, but in opposite directions. Now, there's not an example shown here, but it can go the opposite way too. So if let's say that the G stayed the same, the soprano just kept on a G, kept rocking a G, but then the alto was on an E, but then went down a step, and then back up a step to that E, that would also be called a neighbor tone, just because of the direction is different in this case. As long as the steps are the same, and it resolves back the direction from where it came from, it's still a non-chord tone. The same thing is true of the passing tone here. Just because it goes down in this example doesn't mean that you can't have a passing tone where it goes up. You totally can. Okay, let's see if you had, let's say all this harmony stayed the same, alto stayed on E and soprano stayed on G and didn't move, but then the tenor went C, D, and then E. That would still be a passing tone because the direction stayed the same, and it was all by step, and it resolved to the next harmony. Okay, just skipping back to where we were. Again, same thing. If the harmony changes on the beat, but the voice featuring the non-chord tone does not, it's called an accented, in this case, neighbor tone, accented neighbor tone. But the direction was the same. Here, went up a step, and then went down a step to the same exact note that it was on before. Neighboring tone, but just accented because the harmony underneath changed together and on the beat. Alright. An escape tone, labeled ET, phone home, sorry, I couldn't resist, is approached by step and then skips in the opposite direction. Well, we finally have our first skip, but harmony goes, the harmony is here, an F major chord, and the soprano goes up by step to a B flat, which certainly does not fit into an F major chord, and then goes down by skip to land into the next harmony. Okay. Escape tones are not accented; they occur in between two chords. So, in the case of the passing tone and the neighboring tone, depending on when the underlying harmony changed the term from either just normal neighbor tone or passing tone to accented. In this case, that cannot happen because escape tones occur between two chords. They have to in order to be an escape tone. But the important part to remember is that it's step and then skip. A music theory teacher I had in college, a way that he gave us to remember how to remember an escape tone was that in order to escape his class, we first had to step out of our chair and then leap out the door. And so that's what he gave us to help remember an escape tone. To escape the class, you had to step out of your chair, then leap out the door. An appoggiatura, labeled APP, is approached by skip and then steps in the opposite direction. So the combination is the same, but the order is different. The order is what's important here. Okay, so first you have a leap. So here we have the soprano going a major third from a G to a B, and then falling in an opposite direction by step to then fall into the harmony. So a C major chord, and then in an accented fashion, the note changes on the beat with the other voices, but then doesn't resolve into the new harmony until there, which it resolves by step. So the important part is leap or skip, then step. And he would help us remember this one by saying after we escaped his classroom by stepping out of our chair, then leaping out the door, we would have to apologize, appoggiatura, we'd have to apologize by leaping back into the room, then stepping into our chair, where we were supposed to be in the first place. Okay. So here the order does matter. So try to remember that. Same thing here. Appoggiaturas are accented, they occur with the second chord. Alright, just a couple more. An anticipation, labeled ANT, is approached by step, then remains the same. It is basically a note of the second chord played early. So you have a C major chord, the soprano voice goes up by step, and then just lands on that note until the underlying harmony changes. So the soprano voice prematurely sang a new chord tone for the next harmonic change or shift. It anticipated the next chord early. Okay, and the anticipation goes exactly the same way, in the opposite direction. Okay, so you have an F major chord, and then the soprano voice went down by step to rock an E, apparently, and then the next chord rang, and then it was resolved. So it kind of resolved early in anticipation of the next harmony. Okay, a retardation, labeled RET, keeps a note the same and then steps upwards. So here the harmony was the C major chord, then it switched to an F major chord, and rather than analyzing this as a, well, what kind of seventh chord is this? An F, A, C, E. F to A, major third, A to C, minor third, and then C to E, a major third. If you said a major seventh, you are correct. You would not label this a major seventh chord. It's a non-chord tone, because this E, which would be the seventh of this chord, is actually just a held over note from the soprano of the previous harmony, then resolved upwards by step. Now the direction is important here, that the harmony, or that the tone does have to resolve to the new harmony up by step. Okay, the opposite is called a different non-chord tone altogether, and that is a suspension. We talked a little bit about a suspension before, but I'm going to be a little bit clearer this time. So you have the C major harmony here, and then the soprano holds out the G, the underlying harmony changes, and then the soprano voice resolves down to the new harmony by step. Okay, so suspension keeps the same tone and then falls downward into the harmony, and a retardation keeps the same note from the previous harmony and then resolves upward. Retardation upward, suspension downward. And they are both accented because they both happen on the new chord. And there's a couple more in this lesson. We're not going to talk about those because they are not part of the unit. But that is the lesson, and I hope you took a couple notes, and we will talk about more of these things in class tomorrow or the next time I see you. And we'll be analyzing some more Bach chorales and labeling our non-chord tones with the correct labels.